The problem with block weapons and my personal annoyances with block defenders, because you talk down on fencers, I see it all the time. Okay, this is interesting. Now, I use both fencing and block weapons. I enjoy both. And I think, they both have their positives. They both have their pros and cons, essentially. But apparently this post spawned a lot of other posts that were kind of reacting to the way this guy is formatting, he's formatting a block versus fencing debate here. But okay, let's continue. I will preface this by saying I almost exclusively run block weapons. I love it since making the change. After it got buffed, I personally think it's better, and the payoff is much better. You're not going to be able to argue with me about it. It's better, because I do think it's better. But two things from my fine brother in arms. One is not superior to the other. It's preference. Fencing is still very effective. Okay, so he's saying he thinks blocking is better, but, it's just his opinion or his preference, I guess. But, then his next point is one is not superior to the other. So, okay, whatever. This is a pretty wild post so far. I've seen plenty of block players get absolutely hammered in my absolute run, so stop it. That's not an argument. Dude, am I reading something wrong? You're not going to be able to argue with me about it if it's better because I think it's better. I will preface this by saying I exclusively run block weapons. Well, okay. Okay, yeah, I don't think I'm missing anything. I just think this guy is, he thinks he's a better block enjoyer than most other block enjoyers, maybe? I've seen plenty of block players get absolutely hammered in my absolute run, so stop it. That's not an argument. Okay. What? What is the argument here in this post? I'm super confused. Block mechanics do not require high skill. Get off your high horse. I'm talking to you, block defenders. This guy is a block user who's... okay, I figured it out. This guy is a block user who's annoyed about how people perceive block weapons to be better than fencing, but he's seen tons of other block players get hammered in absolute runs, so it's... okay, so it's not superior, apparently, to fencing. All right. This is a wild post. I feel like what made this post confusing is the fact that this guy said he almost runs exclusively block weapons. Okay. People think it's high skilled. It's literally not. It took me about 30 minutes to straight practice with the block artificer chainsword in a private inferno match to break the muscle memory of fencing mechanics. I mean, yeah, essentially muscle memory is a good way to put it. That's all it is. You just need to break away from the muscle memory of fencing, which I assume most people use, and have used since launch, especially before block got buffed. I get it, dude. You think you're some walking legend because you use block with tactical. Please just stop. You're not special. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I am extra confused. I am extra confused with this post. I have to be honest. This feels like a blocking versus fencing post. But it's like this guy's specific issue is with how people defend blocking and saying it's just like unanimously better and it's high skilled and that sort of thing. Ultimately, he's saying that's not the case. It's just as easy to use as fencing. But like, what confuses me here is he says, I personally think blocking is better. The payoff is much better. You're not going to be able to argue with me about it. Okay. And then he goes with his number one point, one is not superior to the other. What? Yeah, see, seriously, it says, I will preface this by saying I almost exclusively run block weapons. I love it since making the change after it got buffed. I personally think it's better. The payoff is much better. You're not going to be able to argue with me about it if it's better, because I do think it's better. Okay, I get that part. But then he puts something right here. One is not superior to the other. Okay. Yeah, okay, regardless, yeah, I agree. I don't think one's superior to the other in a sense. I do think when you fight chaos, the moments for blocking is just there's not too many moments for blocking. I guess Hellbrutes are fine. Terminators, they'll get the stacks going. Zangors, but Rubric Marines are where blocking kind of starts to, not be 100% useful all the time. Rubric Marines rarely go in for melee, and when they do, it's only one melee attack, right? So ultimately, fencing is really good for Rubric Marines. I use blocking against Terminators and fencing against Terminators. That's fine. But yeah, to me, there's not really a difference. There's just certain ways you want to approach certain enemies. Rubric Marines, if you're using a blocking weapon, try to open up those fights with some range damage, and then go in with the melee attack. That's probably the best way to do that. But this post, I think this post specifically started, kind of freaking people out because of the way he, because you talk down on fencers. So I have a feeling a fair amount of people kind of thought this was like a block versus fencing situation. And this guy's, the way he formatted this, it looks like that, right? It looks like block versus fencing. But he simply is just saying they're more equal. But he has this way to, like, I get it, dude. You think you're some walking legend. Like, I don't know. It's interesting. It's kind of like he's trying to he's trying to incentivize the debate of block versus fencing, I guess, if I use that right. But yeah, it seems like he's trying to spur people on to a fencing versus block debate. And it's kind of interesting because this definitely spawned a few posts that kind of said the same thing. This sub right now for some reason. Alright. Block is superior to fencing because it does more damage. Block has a higher skill ceiling, so I'm better than you. But see, this is like exactly what the other post was trying to avoid saying, but like it still comes off that way. Quit having fun. Yeah, the classic. We get it. You think you're better because you're not a slave to the fencing meta, but you don't have to lecture us on how oh so superior you are because you sacrifice the vital and always useful melee defensive fencing for the situationally useful burst damage of block. Okay, this one's way more aggressive. This one's way more hostile. Now watch as the block users turn this joke thread into another pointless argument because they want everyone to see how good they are in the game. Guys, you can use both, man. Holy cow, dude. This is just so funny because it's just the way you use a certain melee weapon. It's not even like a chapter-based, rivalry. It's a rivalry based on blocking and fencing weapons. It's based on how you protect yourself. It's so wild. Okay, you know what? At least the point of blocking players being better than fencing players, I feel like it's less about that and more about the fact that people who use blocking definitely at one point in time use fencing. Everyone who's used blocking recently, it's because of the way they reworked blocking, which was great, which is an A+ change that I think the devs deserve more credit for. Blocking is such a good weapon archetype. I have a great time using it. However, I also use fencing a lot too. I like both. I use balance also, just not as much as fencing or blocking. I think what's interesting about blocking is you can find certain weapons that are just better with the blocking archetype but have lower rarity. Apparently the mastercrafted blocking power sword is pretty good, so I'm definitely going to try that out eventually, hopefully soon. But yeah, so fencing versus blocking. Sure, there's definitely moments where one is better than the other. You can bring both into any operation and perform well with it. You don't have to worry about that. I just think sometimes you have to... I will say the one part about the high skill part about this is chaos. Because I feel like with chaos, it's kind of working... it's working against you using blocking, at least in, rubric marine situations, sorcerer situations. Hellbrew is pretty good for either fencing or block, I guess. But yeah, when it comes to like Zangors, you can get block stacks off of that. So regardless, with Chaos, blocking's a little bit more inconsistent. It really depends on what enemies you see on screen. That said, blocking's still very good. You can still use blocking against Terminators. You can still use blocking against the Zangors. Disc Shamans are probably a little bit harder to hit. But yeah, ultimately, if you have trouble with taking out a Rubric Marine with a blocking weapon, all you really need is a couple headshots, and you should be fine. With fencing, the thing about fencing is you kind of put yourself in a position where you need to see a certain attack sometimes to, like, protect yourself in a sense. If they throw an unblockable attack, neither blocking or fencing is going to be able to deal with that. But yeah, with fencing, you would definitely want to see something like, non-lethal gun strikes give you armor. That's really good with fencing. And ultimately, fencing does have the added benefit of just being able to, like, spam it in a wave of gaunts, and you're fine. I think blocking, you can essentially do the same thing, but you need to make sure you hit a melee attack eventually. But still, I think fencing is good. I think fencing is good. Blocking is good. Is there a superiority? The only superiority blocking has is with... it doesn't make sense, how people, freak out about this. Blocking literally buffs your melee damage. Blocking does have higher damage than fencing. It has nothing to do with saying that it's better than fencing. It's just, hey, blocking, if you want more damage, that is the better option. That's how that works. It's not about, hey, you're losing DPS if you use fencing. You're not. You're not well, you're losing melee DPS 100%, but like you can still have a high DPS build with fencing weapons. You're just not using your melee weapon as often as a blocking weapon. Holy cow, this is so wild. Block is superior to fencing because it does more damage. It does more melee damage. It's a superior melee choice, I guess. But like with fencing weapons, you don't really melee with them. My first experience with like this whole like fencing blocking situation, I was definitely playing the fencing power sword on Bulwark for the majority of my beginning operation experience. So with fencing, I just, muscle memory. I'd grown accustomed to it. But still, with that said, as a Bulwark, I was getting some pretty low melee numbers, and at the time, pretty low range damage numbers also, because I was using a bolt pistol. So yeah, bolt pistol and a fencing power sword, I barely got any damage, but, I was able to get through the lethal operations purely with Invigorating Icon and good parries. So, depending on what class you're using, you really aren't concerned with the melee damage numbers. But okay, this was an interesting post, and of course there's a good reaction post to this, or again, a post that was spurred on by a post like this. Y'all are seriously overcomplicating the block versus parry debate. There's no argument for which one is better. They both have strengths and weaknesses that serve unique purposes. If you completely subscribe to one type of melee weapon, then you are failing to see the point. It's fine to say you prefer one type over the other, but that doesn't mean anything besides that you can't be bothered to learn the benefits of other weapon types. Shout out to the players who went to blocking and never switched. I feel like those players are the types that are just like, they just really enjoyed blocking and definitely are good examples on why it's good. But I do find it funny where it's just like, as soon as blocking was reworked, it's like, oh, I'm never switching. that's not, honestly, there's power in that. There's more power to you when you find something that you enjoy and you commit to it. Those are admirable traits, something like that, right? It's not about which one is better. It's about which one fits your build more comfortably. For example, if you're using Armor of Retribution on Bulwark or Assault, then you'd be dumb not to use a parry weapon. But if you're not using any perks with benefit from perfect parries or gun strikes and just need raw damage, then block may be worth trying out. You also need to factor in the stats on each weapon and consider how time to kill will be affected. Some weapons, it's better to use balance variant just for the improved stats, Power Fist and Combat Knife specifically. I think that's kind of an interesting point for sure, is that there are other weapons than fencing and blocking. Honestly, I do really enjoy the fact that like balanced weapons are in a weird spot where it's like, oh, you need a specific balanced weapon type, like a purple balanced Power Fist or something. I forget how that actually worked out, but I just learned about the green blocking power sword. So again, it can be a little bit weird navigating the world of melee weapons in this game, but ultimately I think it kind of plays into its favor that we actually have a variety of like different stats throughout the rarities. However, it'd be pretty cool to see some balanced weapons get a speed buff, but okay, ultimately, let's continue. Viability and skill do not factor into this discussion. All three types are viable and can be learned with a bit of effort. Beyond a few outliers such as Relic Balanced Chainsword, which is just doo-doo. Relic Balanced Chainsword is bad. Alright, maybe I'll try that out one day too. If you're playing on the higher difficulties, you should be able to use all three types comfortably and should be thinking about which type complements your build the best. Saying the block is bad because it's too sweaty, or that fencing is bad because more damage, are both terrible takes that miss the point entirely of why there are different melee weapon types in the first place. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you know how it is, you just get one post of one guy, like, kind of spurring on an argument around blocking versus fencing, and like the original post of this, it was like 3 days ago, and the past two posts were within a couple days. That original post that I covered at the beginning of this video definitely spurred on a bit of a block versus parry debate. But yeah, ultimately use what you want to use. For me, when it comes to like picking a build that I want to play around fencing or blocking, it's mostly centers around what weapon I want to use, and then I go into the perks. Like, for example, if I wanted to try out the balanced chainsword, I'll definitely put on like duelist. Honestly, if I was to do that, I would likely go with tactical, because tactical still has the option where if you get a gun strike, you get extra melee damage. So yeah, see, I'm already trying to cook with a balanced chainsword, which essentially is just building around a fencing chainsword, but it's a little slower. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the balanced chainsword should have some extra damage, right? So I feel like that's a little bit interesting. But it's probably slow, right? It's probably very slow, which is unfortunate. Yeah, even honestly, what chainsword, the purple variant, the blocking purple chainsword, that one's very fast, so that one's really good. But see, blocking weapon, you can still use battle focus for both though. So any perks you see with blocking and parry benefits are probably where you want to end up. Ultimately. But yeah, regardless, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this. I'm definitely going to check out some comments about this, but I'm going to look for particularly unhinged comments. I just want to see somebody, you know, getting involved at this in this block versus parry debate at like face value, where they're just like campaigning against blocking or fencing weapons. I'm sorry, can someone genuinely explain to me how block weapons are better than fencing weapons? Like, I genuinely think fencing weapons are the best melee options, since you get access to gun strikes consistently, and it allows you to melee mini bosses like Carnifexes and Hellbrutes for gun strikes. Well, see, that's exactly why people are kind of misunderstanding this debate a little bit. The thing is, it's not so much about blocking weapons being better than fencing weapons. Blocking weapons are better melee weapons than fencing weapons. And if you want to play around gun strikes, of course, go fencing. No, nobody's debating that. I mean, you can still do perfect dodges for gun strikes, regardless if you're playing blocking. But still, if you want some easy to gain gun strikes, fencing is definitely the way to go about that. But allows you to melee mini bosses like Carnifexes and Hellbrutes for gun strikes. I mean, that's fine. But with blocking weapons, you can block them also and just, you know, get a good melee attack on them. And regardless, both these are very ammo efficient. So, I mean, you're not really making a bad play picking either of these and getting good with them, because you can save a lot of ammo just being good with blocking and fencing. But yeah, sometimes when it comes to engaging a group of enemies, running in there with a blocking weapon, you're going to get more damage out of, you know, just melee swings in general than running in there with a fencing weapon. So it's not about blocking being better, it's a better melee weapon. As you detail here with the gun strikes, yeah, you're on it. Just, you know, continue doing your thing. But if you ever get bored with getting easy mode gun strikes, oh god, I don't want to debate anybody. I'm just joking. They are easy to get gun strikes, but it's not easy mode, okay? Anyway, if you ever want to, you know, kind of, you know, step outside the box a bit, definitely pick up blocking. It's very, very fun, and yeah, it could be a little bit harder at first, but you will definitely get it down. I can now kill, out-damage, and outlast anyone with my fencing blade, regularly have to carry teams on lethal, and can do it just fine with fencing. Alright, well, there you have it. No, seriously, more power to this guy. If you have a way to play that you enjoy, yeah, continue doing it. But ultimately, you know, you can still find some fun trying out different things. Now, this guy says he out-damages anyone, you know, with his fencing blade, and I'm curious if he means by melee damage. I mean, you can. Essentially, you can if you go for it. But with blocking players, they are definitely going to have an easier time dealing with enemies with melee attacks. It's just, that is what blocking is for. Now, hey, you know what? If you're a fencing user and you're a melee-only fencing user, hey, more power to you if you can pull it off. But he mentions in lethal. I'm just not too sure how good going into melee combat with a fencing weapon in absolute. I'm just not too sure how good that's going to turn out. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, is what I'm trying to say. So, I don't know. If this guy can pull it off, more power to him, but you'll be surprised how many comments here are just like, blocking is bad, fencing is good. There's a lot of comments like that, but this one I find this one a little bit more creative, so I like this one. The problem is both sides thinking that their defense type is definitely better than the other, when it's really just dependent on weapon and whether or not you play more offensively or defensively. Both are good. I will say you are wrong. It's not a fencing meta, and blocks burst damage is not niche. I think this is kind of interesting. I think it's, I think honestly these are interesting discussions when it comes to blocking and fencing, because you can always see people kind of play differently. Ultimately, you can see people who are like, hey, I have a fencing weapon, but I also have, you know, melee damage perks, and it does fine. And then you see people who are like, well, honestly, I just use blocking to protect myself. Like, it could be really weird. It could be really weird out there. It's kind of interesting that like people are trying to pin a meta on either of these, and I would kind of hold off on doing that, but I guess it really depends on ultimately what actual weapon you are using, what your primary is. And certainly you can make an argument that like one or the other is better against Tyranids or Chaos, sure. But still, I think the fact that you can find not only ways to make blocking work against Chaos, but you can find ways where people build blocking builds that are absolutely eviscerating Chaos is definitely interesting. But here's the thing for me though. When I was doing my Chaos runs with a I did a few solo runs against Chaos. They weren't like too sweaty or anything, as like it was me with bots. I went through Obelisk and I missed out on a Terminus spawn, so that was very lucky. But yeah, I was able to do solo runs with blocking and, well, I was gonna say fencing, but I actually was using a balanced Thunderhammer. So I guess it ultimately just, yeah, offensive or defensively, the way you want to play it definitely matters. But still, you can find moments for each of these weapon types to kind of, you can find moments to engage 100%. But like, it's easier to engage with a fencing weapon when you have ground slam. Kind of see what I'm getting at? It's not just about fencing or blocking. Sometimes it matters what actual, you know, skills, you know, what actual perks you're using. So in the PTS, what's interesting, I'm pretty sure this should be in the vanilla game also, but I'm not 100% sure. No, it's definitely PTS only, because it's a patch 8 change, I believe, where Aura is going to, Intimidating Aura is going to be able to trigger on blocking weapons. Now, that's interesting. That's interesting. For Bulwarks, who are going to be using Thunderhammer, that might be one of the best blocking setups in the game. So, I don't know. We will see. We will see. But hey, you know what? I will say the story is not done with the fencing versus blocking discussions, because Bulwark is going to have the ultimate say in this, because Bulwark has the fencing builds and the blocking builds are coming. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Ultimately, it is kind of cringe to make this like a legit argument of like what's better, fencing versus blocking. I think when people have fun with this, then it's a little bit more fun to react to. Like ultimately, some of the blocking versus fencing comments are pretty funny. They are. I saw a chain of just people saying, block is better, parry is better, block is better, parry is better. It was kind of hilarious. Like, that stuff is funny. But yeah, when people are just like, oh no, you're bad if you use this and I'm good, that's when it gets a little bit cringe. The memes are good though. Like even the one we saw earlier with the stop having fun meme, that's fine. Ultimately. But yeah, when you take this conversation too seriously, it kind of makes it a little bit less fun to talk about. But when people are actually like, you know, when people are setting up points that are like, hey man, I use both and I think both are fine, and then you see somebody react to it like, you know what, no, fencing is distinctively better than blocking, and then yeah, it just snowballs. That sort of thing's kind of funny. But yeah, regardless, don't take it too seriously, guys. It's just melee types. It's just melee types in a video game. But yeah, I have a feeling this won't be the last time we react to some fencing versus blocking debates, quote unquote. But still, to be honest, I don't think we will see the end of this discussion, because yes, Bulwark is getting the Thunderhammer, and yes, Bulwark is going to have some pretty strong blocking builds soon. So pretty interesting. Ultimately, I like to see the discussions and how people can kind of stretch these melee types to their, you know, fullest. Seeing people kind of talk about how, you know, fencing is just as good as with melee against blocking, that's just not true. But like, you know, again, to each their own. More power to you if you can pull it off. I'm sure there's probably a fencing weapon out there that's pretty good for melee. I mean, honestly, if you build around it, if you just have melee damage perks, you're gonna get good melee damage. You know, that it is what it is. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you guys seen anything cringeworthy about, fencing versus blocking debates, or if you have actually a point to make in this, feel free to comment. But regardless, I will be using fencing and blocking, and I will use blocking for melee builds and use fencing for ranged weapon builds, aiming down the sight. I do like my panic parries, but yeah. Regardless, I have fun using both. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. Thanks for watching.